Hi, this is Matt Irwin. Please leave a message or send me a text.
The mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages.
That's stupid.
Hi, this is Matt Irwin. Please leave a
Unmute my audio. Can you hear me now, Matt? Ah, there we go. I'm unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
Okay, good. I guess that means the clock in the clubhouse wall says it's 9:02, so let's begin this thing. And this is the CSC sort of live, I guess it may be the first father and son connection. My name's Mark Irwin, and I was lucky enough to be part of the CSC. I was a pimply-faced kid, skinny kid from Mississauga in 1970 when I went to my first meeting, and that was 50 years ago. And from there, going to York University in the film program, and ending up in starting with documentaries and indie films to studio films. Things changed, things progressed, and in 1987, I decided, with the urging of my agent, to move to Hollywood and start pushing things from there. So when I moved away from Toronto and to Hollywood, this guy was 3 years old. Now, let him introduce himself and how he got to where he is on screen.
Yeah, so I'm Matt Irwin, the younger of us two, clearly. I'm a cinematographer, associate member with the CSC. I'm now based in Toronto, but formerly Los Angeles for about a little under 15 years of a career. And in that time, I've been a second AC, I've been a focus puller, I've been a gaffer, was a 600 operator for a while, and all the while, and now shooting. And for me these days, I'm kind of floating in between indie features and shorts, documentaries, and branded content, and the occasional music video. But prior to that, I spent another 10 years growing up with you on some pretty large studio features, and learning it all as I guess a trade craft. And I think it was 10 features before I was 18, or before film school at least. And I ended up at Cal State Long Beach Film School, and met some very good people there, and that sort of launched my own career as a shooter. And I've kind of done this, I guess, inside out and backwards, but here we are.
Yes, here we are. And the film, I became a member of the CSC in 1980, just after Scanners and The Dead Zone, films like that, and ended up progressing to The Fly. That was when my agent in California said, "It's not up to me where you live. I don't have to shovel your driveway, but if I were you, I'd sell myself on The Fly and move into this market." And that was the time when Toronto was pretty quiet, and not the explosion that it is now, Hollywood North. So starting when Matt was 3, I ended up taking him on the set to RoboCop 2. His first IMDb credit is Dumb and Dumber, 1994, 10 years old.
Yeah.
And growing up on a set, I didn't have any mentors. I started shooting no budget movies. I had directors who were mentors, but no, the mechanics of what I learned was from one guy called Jock Brandis, who was quite an inspiration in terms of mechanical and technical innovation. So I learned kind of by trial and error, and it would create things that would fall apart or would succeed. But Matt, you grew up on sets with my crew.
Yeah.
And how did they shape your understanding?
I have the perspective now of looking back, but at the time I didn't really realize what that was. You don't when you're 8, 9, 15, whatever. But It was three people. Oh, and there it all is. Yeah, it was three people. It was you. It was Jay Yowler, your gaffer of several decades, 30 years, I think, and Gary Yoshino, who was your A first for a very, very long time. And I had, I guess by default, I had attached to the camera department. Yeah, there's Gary. And so in that, I think Gary really was a patient, thorough teacher, and trained me up as a second. And the one thing that I truly appreciate about Gary was that he held me to the same standard as any of the other seconds on the crew. I was kind of like, it was this weird fill-in thing where I was like attached to a camera. So I was doing like slating duties. And then as I got older, I'd, you know, be handed a lens or a magazine or a camera report. Because Gary held me to that standard, I think he's largely responsible for my work ethic, for better or for worse, and kind of my responsibility factor of this job.
And the mechanics of it as an assistant are different than a cinematographer.
Very much so.
When you were, this is Mighty Ducks, I think, when you were younger, you were under the tutelage of assistants.
Yeah.
And learning how everything was structured. Can you talk a little about? Let me explain. When you were 12, I ended up coming back to Toronto, first time for whatever that is, 8-9 years, to do a TV movie, and you came along as my son, and you know, an assistant. It was an IA job in Toronto. After the first day of shooting, you kind of fit in the way you fit in with my crew, with your crew.
Mm-hmm.
And let me find another picture here. You were learning everything about everything, not just making movies. And at the end of that day, yeah, that was on Freddie. Here's Mighty Ducks. At the end of that day, you were 12 years old, so you'd been at it literally for 6 or 7 years, been on set since you were 3 years old. I asked you, we're driving back to the hotel, what did you think of those guys, that crew? And I had these, some of them were new, some of them from my crew from The Fly, and others were people I didn't really know. And I asked, what did you think of those guys? And there was dead silence. I'm driving on the QEW thinking, this guy's really good or really bad, that he had a dead silence. And I was about to say, and then you turned and looked at me and said, those guys, their AKS case is all screwed up. They got the filters in the wrong pouch. They don't put the sticks on the cart. And it was all from this, I don't know if it's like brainwashing, but a regimented point of view.
Yeah.
From the life that you had learned. And it was all about stuff like this, literally pitching in at, when you're 10 years old, most kids come to the set and say, wow, cool, where's craft service? And they're gone. And you would literally sit there, sometimes, even if there's Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels in bed, this was your first screen credit.
There's no IA position that says clapper boy, as far as I'm aware, but
no. I mean, it's a tradition. And I would have to kind of have nose to nose with, I'm looking for something even more. Yeah, this was some explosion way back when. The script supervisors would usually say, well, you know, I can't count on his, he's going to work with you and you are going to work with him. And that's in many ways.
I've always been curious how you pulled this off, because I mean, knowing rules and what they are and safety standards, I just can't see this happening anymore today in the way it did. But
that you were on the set?
Yeah.
I don't know. No one ever really addressed it as some sort of transgression.
Yeah. I remember a few times being on a sound stage. I think it might have been Vampire in Brooklyn or something. And Gary or somebody pulled me aside and says, so there's studio executives coming today. You can't touch lenses or mags today. Maybe just hang out with the slate.
And then you said, could I just thread the Area 3 instead of the movie cam? How's that? That'd be better. Well, it was really, this is the cameras you started with, and they're to tape to a sockler. So what's interesting for me, I mean, you got to know people and they got to know you. Especially, I'm looking for an old and gray, here's the crew in Toronto. And this guy wearing a Maple Leafs hat, all my crew in Vancouver is cursing right now, but this is Jeff Siva, who his nickname is Waco, and he was part of Gary's crew, my crew in California. Can you talk any about him? Because he ended up filling an empty slot in Toronto on this movie.
Waco was Gary's second, at least when I came into the picture, and I mean now he's a pretty big time first in his own right, and he and Gary both in their own different ways taught me this job, or at least the technical camera side of this job. I had a lot of respect for Waco. He was cool. What were you saying?
Well, a lot of these guys had a homemade experience. I mean, Waco started in Texas, and they started as trainees and loaders. So a lot of the baggage of knowledge that they accumulated would kind of ooze out to other people, and some of the good habits and the bad habits. So that was my job, to kind of beat up people and say, no, we're not going to do it this way. That part of my mindset in learning how to. There's gripitis is a disease that I found is common everywhere. That why use a C-stand when 20 cheeseburgers and 200 feet of pipe will do? And I always joke with these guys. We're designing a glider, not an anvil factory. Let's make it light and effective. So these are the guys who would share my output or my input. Let's see. There's another cool picture. That's what's her name? Carrie Fisher's mother. What's her name? Debbie Reynolds. So quite often my ideas about design, this is one thing that drove me crazy, a ball level on a four-way level. So I ended up designing a lot of things that were all ball level, like this. A couple of years later, this was a Mighty Ducks 2 out in Malibu. And so my mindset kind of break the rules or modify them slightly.
Yeah.
How does your mindset go?
Well, I came up learning all of this. I mean, you and Jay had developed a system of lighting, like literally a physical system of lighting, and that was evolving on your sets while I was observing and learning lighting. And a lot of it came down to, I think, something that is not really spoken about publicly, but it's the simple fact of making the day, making your schedule, getting it done quickly. And I know that, you'd rather be shooting rather than spending time setting up lighting. And so you guys have developed over a number of years this box lighting system based on Kino flows, where you I don't want to say self-gripping, but they were really close to turning on and shooting. And these were garage built, tailgate built lights containing Kino guts, and it was pretty cool. So how did that all start for you? I mean, I know it went back to Jock Brandis in Toronto, but what was that history?
The absolute beginning of this was of making these utilitarian lights. First of all, I have to rewind. By the way, let me just make an announcement to anyone who's watching. Please, on Facebook, on the Facebook page, the CSC, call in or write in or ask any questions, because this is part of this give and take. Matt and I can talk all day, but some people have questions about different films, and please ask about Matt and about any films I've done. The one film I want to mention is The Fly, and I had on The Fly a big lighting crew. One of the guys was a tall German guy who had these crazy ideas about lights. And his particular thing was office lights, fluorescent tubes. And he was going to light film sets with fluorescent tubes. And we all thought he was crazy. Little did we know that Frieder Hochheim had plans, and those plans included inventing kinoflows. So that the tube went from this utilitarian thing to a structural element. Up until then, tubes were just one at a time. Then we started ganging them together and using them as kino structures. And then Jay had the idea after we did, I think it was Mighty Ducks, he invented, I'm mentioning Frieder Hochheim because Jay came up with a light that he called the Frieder beater. And it was a rifle case, and I'm kind of looking through these. I hope these aren't scrolling too quickly. Through these to mount kino bulbs on a device that we owned that could be mounted in a different way. And then we realized that I kind of pushed and said, well, what I hate about kinos is that they're essentially bulb holders. You open it up, there's 4 bulbs, and then you have to gift wrap it with gel, with diffusion, and then the back and the sides. And it takes forever. And there's always somebody on a ladder while you're trying to set the shot. So my motto was less rigging, more rolling. And that's what has prompted this kind of logic that I would put up lights to balance the level. Now, as kinos, some of these lights were built off of Image 80s and Image 85s or 4-foot kinos, standard 4-bangers. Now with LED tubes, you can put the lights anywhere you want and change the Kelvin and the intensity. So the light goes where it is. That was my view, to have a light that you could turn on. It was already diffused, like this kind of thing. Or let me see if I can find something with faces. It was much easier and much quicker to set up these lights and modify themselves or balance them. Now with LEDs, we literally put them where we want them, bring in the actors and dial it down and roll. And no gel, no fussing around. I also want to point out that this picture is an inspiration. This was what I call tailgate technology. And this was Billy who made the Billy box light on the tailgate. He was a Jenny op, and Matt designed these. And they were, as you say, home hardware.
Right. Yeah, what I appreciated about these, I mean, you had used these in extremely large numbers. I remember, I think I visited the set of Deck the Halls, and at the time I was in film school, and I just remembered you had ringed the set on 3 sides at the ceiling corners with BBLs, which was the square kind of 4-foot 4-bank shape.
Yeah.
And it was a big dinner scene or something like that. And you did a turnaround, and it was literally, as soon as the dollies crossed to the other side of the table, the lights started switching and rebalancing, and then you were rolling in 5 minutes. And that completely melted my brain as a film student, going like, how the hell did this happen so fast? But the fact that these are 3-dimensional, I got to say, I miss working with these because I had to kind of destruct a lot of these because, moving and downsizing happens. But because these could work as a key, as a liner, as a backlight, as kind of anything on an indie set, you could kind of leave fixtures in place and repurpose them as you move around with the cameras. It was a really cool system.
Exactly, and the upside is that it was fast and efficient. And part of my philosophy in getting past the gripology mentality was to tell them, this is a box of light. I want you to tie it to the ceiling. Don't rig it. Don't think of it as a light. Think of it as a box. How would you attach a box to a ceiling? And we use rope ratchets and different things. The problem with these lights is that they don't get small. Once you build a box, you have to put it somewhere. So that led to me making a bunch of lights. This was Jay's BFL that he, when they were fluorescents, all the ballasts were in the frame. So you had no lunchbox connector. It was all in there. And you'd flip them 27 tubes. Now these have been retrofitted to LEDs. And
And that was the original fixture of a lot of these, right?
yeah, and from us in Hollywood, my connection to production services and Doug Dale's in Toronto, production services built all these, and we use them in Canada and in California. Part of the upside is these, and I don't want to keep riffing on these lights too much. They are these were Jay's design. This was on a film called The Last Godfather we did at Paramount. These are lights kind of poor man's grid, you know. But here, this is, if anyone knows Cherry Beach, this is Ira Cohen at Cherry Beach on that TV movie I did 10 years ago. And I couldn't bring the boxes with me. So I started thinking outside the box. And these are standard 4-banger Kinos with diffusion frames. And the frames are Home Hardware, Canadian Tire, PVC connectors. These corner pieces are actually Lee Valley. And they've allowed me to take these lights with a skin or a rag. This is like a tea cozy thing with what do you call it, elastic, and then take them apart, put them together, and then light them in in this case, it was down in Liberty Village, a standing set of a courtroom, and did a big courtroom drama with those lights now diffused completely, Image 80s and 4-foot bangers. But to answer your question, or to riff on what you were saying about making the day,
Yeah.
started with big budget things and ended up going to documentaries. You did a film called Green Rush, and I'm interested in that. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Yeah. Green Rush. That was not too long ago. I had just come off about 2 years of shooting a documentary, and Green Rush was a really small indie thriller. It was about a robbery gone wrong on a cannabis farm in Northern California, and the director was Jared Roxburgh, who's an old film school friend of mine. This was a film that was supposed to take place, the story takes place over one long day, and we had a less than $200,000 budget. We had a 10-day schedule, and you know, Jared's a very pragmatic, respectful director, and so he had made this rule that we are not crossing 12 hours of working time, because you know, the crew's on favor rates and on a flat and the whole thing. And so when you factor in a lunch, that's 11 working hours to do, I think it was 98 pages over 10 days. And so, you know, how do you go about that? It was pretty challenging. And so, yeah, there you go. Actually, if I can pull some stills here, if you can, give me the screen for a second.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing right now.
Let's see here. So, so we had decided early on that we were going to approach this film kind of in the sense that it was a documentary. Don't overlight it. Make it an embellished doc. Keep the lighting rough and unpolished. You know, light the interior spaces in a way that we can see most of the room, and I'd only have to like walk in, fill or bounce, or you know, a little modifier. But really, it was all about, you know, working with available light, both interior and exterior. We had to create the light inside, but sort of a walk in and shoot thing. And so it came down, pulling this off came down to a couple factors. It was the location, and we had found a real working cannabis farm in Northern California, and they tailored the script to the location. So just everything was reworked so it would work for us. And in doing that, everything was either a cart push or a stake bed shuttle away. And so I sat down with Jared and the first AD Cole, and we broke down the script and we timed everything out day by day. So in the mornings we'd go outside and shoot. We'd go inside in the middle of the day, come outside in the afternoon and shoot. And because it all takes place over one day, my thought was, as long as I can keep everything cross-lit or backlit, with the exception of like the dusk stuff, it would all cut together, because the story cuts away to in between two story threads happening at once. So we had a lot of leeway to get around that. Somehow we pulled this off. Let's see here. This main room was a pretty dingy kind of vibe. This was all, you know, the film's called Green Rush. It's about marijuana and money. The forest is green, and so I didn't want to fall into this cliche of cool white dingy fluorescence. And so my gaffer Nate Carvalho and I decided on tungsten balanced quasar tubes under a daylight balanced camera, and all of this was mostly lit to be existing and just modified a little bit. And we would fly through this stuff, one camera with primes.
What camera did you use, by the way?
This was an Amira, and we ended up maybe foolishly on primes. We were really after the look, but it was Cook Speed Pancros, and we decided on shooting almost everything as a oneer with a couple pieces of coverage versus traditional build a box kind of coverage, because that's how you die with one camera. So we created a rule. This is a story that's mainly happening to one person, this guy, the main character, Rob. And so we decided that every scene involving him would be shot and covered from his perspective. So, you know, oftentimes he would get a 32 in the face, and then when we flipped, it would be a 40 or 75 or, you know, longer, but everything was anchored from his perspective. And it actually made block shooting and coverage a lot more simple. And I think we only covered a couple scenes traditionally, but when we did, it was just horrible. You know, like there was a dialogue scene outside we had to do, and it was, yeah, this was it. It was like a big establisher, a wide, a two shot, two overs, and a reverse wide. And man, one camera, brutal. But for the most part, it worked, and we made our days all the way through.
And now, from your perspective as someone who literally grew up on a set, was that part of your kind of slipstream streamlining method to make your day, having that those habits, not just knowledge, but that reflex to cut corners and make the day?
Yeah, I think that's something that is constantly evolving, I guess, as you learn more. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if I have an answer to that at the moment.
Because I've had, by default, you know, I started out doing horror films. I moved to California, did more horror films for Wes Craven.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I'm the Prince of Darkness, that's my deal. And then I got a call to do a comedy. These two brothers who'd never done anything, literally anything. They wrote a few Seinfeld episodes, and that was it. So they said, "You seem like a nice guy. You want to shoot this movie?" Yeah, okay. I ended up with all my dark Prince of Darkness kind of vibe on my shoulder, shooting Dumb and Dumber. And the very first day, with one camera, Jim Carrey, okay, let's go again and match that. See if you could do that. And he looked at Peter and Bobby and myself and said, "What did I do? I have no idea." Oh, okay. So from then on, 1994, I've used two cameras for everything.
Yeah.
And if you have a 10-page day, that's how you get it.
Yeah. We would have used two if we could have.
By the way, what lenses did you use on the Amira?
That one was vintage Cook Speed Pancros. They've been a favorite of mine for quite a while. I'm just noticing here, Michael's asking if I prefer to operate as I shoot, which is an interesting question for the both of us. But you know, I learned absorbing things on sets with you, and you always operate and kind of work and light from the camera, and that's very much the same for me, especially at least especially with single camera stuff. I've begun to lean on operators a little bit more, but yeah, operating just feels right. Lighting from the camera just feels right to me. You know, when I can or I'm allowed to do it. But what's your reasoning?
Well, first of all, let me point out that Matt is the digital member of the family, and I'm the analog member of the family. So a viewfinder for me was just kind of, that was the magic, the alchemy in there. There was no, other than a witness monitor that came up in the 90s. The director would stand beside me, and then the next night we go to see dailies. And I think most people watching this have never had the experience of a director in a screening room at 10:30 at night, the director saying, make it darker. And the producer saying, don't forget the drive-ins, don't make it too dark. The drive-ins, all right. So now we have Video Village, and I've always operated a camera. I've kind of lit through a camera when it was an analog system, and now it's a kind of it's a shared experience. And I've truly had producers come up to me and say, is her hair going to be that green? Looking at this monitor in a tent, and I call it camping with computers, because it's, you're not supposed to be watching TV in a tent in the rain. Come on. These are meant to be mounted in a rack in a stage. So that led to me operating a camera and guiding everything from there. Two things I want to talk about. One of them is the simple process of lookup tables and light control or image control. And the very first, I'm reflecting on Denny Claremont here, because the very first thing I ever did was with Denny. A digital thing I did was with an F900, a Flight 93 movie we shot in Vancouver. And I'd never shot HD, and I did all the tests. We're on the set, and I'm looking at this monitor, and everyone's looking at it. Denny, Terry, Alan, everybody. And it looks terrible. And I said, well, what is this? Oh, no, that's Rec 709. Rec 709, you got Rec 709. All right, well, I don't get this. And I tried to light the set to deal with the blown out highlights and the compressed blacks, the overblown saturation, and the set looked terrible. And I said, are there any other methods of looking? Well, yeah, and you can look at it log. Yeah, that's it. Look at it. Oh, perfect. Oh my God. Relit the set, and I've done that ever since. I use an on-set monitor, or a onboard monitor, my own Panasonic, that's been around a long time. Two things happen. One, I make a LUT every time, every show that I call Mark 709. And DITs who are watching this know what I'm talking about. The second thing I do that's, to me, is way more important, and it's because it can be done, is to take frame grabs every day, 50 setups, 2 cameras or more. I come home with a USB stick this big with 50 shots. And let me just share the screen for a minute, if I can. And can you see that one now?
Still your face.
Okay, let me, I didn't click on this. Okay, so here's a film I did in Asia. And this is what it was like shooting it with crew. One thing that I found is with frame grabs.
Maybe go a hair slower if you.
Okay. Well, I want to get to the frame grabs. This was
okay. Gotcha.
An American director. This director with a Hindi cast, all in. They call it Hinglish but it was all Hindi. And he and I were the only kind of North Americans. An incredible film. I can talk at length about it. But what I wanted to do was to come back to Mumbai and they said, of course. Well, I did all the frame grabs anyway and color them completely, because I found that LUTs are great in having computers talk to each other, but they don't always say what you had in mind. And if I can give someone a frame grab and say, this is what I want to see, this kind of green. This was an optical, by the way. The elephants were in Thailand, north of Chiang Mai, and this road was in Film City in Mumbai. And he
Right.
was walking, he was about 6 inches away from a green screen at that point. So when things are composited, it's easier, this was in Bangkok, to just say, here they are. I will give the colorist, and I didn't come back to India. I didn't get the gig to come back. But he had all these frame grabs. These are the frame grabs I gave him, but what I took from the film. And he made it look like I wanted it to look. So I'm a big proponent of working with the DIT to create your own LUT and get frame grabs from every day. How does that reflect on you?
I'm just curious though, how are you delivering the frame grabs and like reconciling differences between monitors and who's viewing what where? Were you able to get around that somehow?
Yes, I lucked out. I met with a colorist and I gave him the thumb drive and said, let's look at it on this monitor, which was an iMac or something.
Yeah.
And we would agree on the color. What you're seeing here on the split screen is from a photo sharing site. And that's what I do, put all the frame grabs in scene order on this. Let me see if I can leap ahead to some darker stuff. Yeah, we had a lot of day for night bad guy stuff that was very edgy. And I wanted to be sure that what he was going to create is what I was putting into it, because day for night is always an experiment other than how much blue do you want. So I never trust, I learned the hard way that LUTs don't talk to each other, certainly internationally. And frame grabs like this have saved me many times. What else was I going to say?
Yeah. I've had a somewhat opposite experience, actually. I definitely started working in 709, I think like a lot of us did, and maybe still do to an extent, but I would always get burned, and it's that universal problem of what you're recording as metadata is going all the way down the post chain, and then when you finally get to grading at the end and you put in the look that had been planned from the start, everyone's been looking at something else and they've forgotten that look and they freak. And so I've really taken to creating custom LUTs, and I kind of do a similar thing to you with Mark 709. I have, sort of my own log to video LUT that I keep tweaking as I go project to project, and attach it, send it to the colorists. And then on my own, I'll usually, if I have access to footage, or I'll have the DIT pull a couple of clips and I'll do my own rough grade on it, and then forward those along. I learned from you, forward it to the director, the producer, like everybody, and the colorist.
Yeah,
so
that's the secret. While you're shooting, every day frame grabs go to the network, the studio, the producer, the director. And I can't describe how many times directors have said, I have my own scrapbook of the whole thing I've done. Well, what you're doing is imprinting on everyone. Those people in power, basically, that this is the look you're after. And if it's dark and blue and moody, and now the sun has come out, and that's fault tracks the scene or the story point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. A lot of people get detached, and certainly once there's something called temp love that directors engage in watching something that's been down-res on an Avid. And then they're convinced that that's what their film should look like. It's very scary. Anyway, I'm sharing something that this was all part of the same mindset to take this journey. It's interesting mentioning the Fairley brothers. Story-wise, there's always the darkness before dawn, the turn of the plot, the happy ending, the third act leads to the end. They couldn't understand that. Their belief was that brighter is funnier. And if it wasn't funny, that's because it wasn't bright enough. So they would go out of their way to make footage as bright as possible, which was kind of crazy.
One of the things I learned from you pretty early on, when I kind of picked this as a career was the notion of baseline as it refers to lighting. Can you explain what baseline means to you?
Well, it's interesting. When I started as, I learned about cinematography from my sort of mentor, a film school professor called Terrence McCartney Fieldgate, who was a teacher to many people from the National Film Board. He's the guy in 1960 shot a film called Primary about John F. Kennedy's primary to become president. And he ended up teaching a lot of young filmmakers, D.A. Pennebaker, Ricky Leacock, the Maisel brothers, people like that. And I was able to absorb his mindset. And he was steeped in documentary. So knowing the way film had strengths and weaknesses, he knew that you needed a base light for exposure on film. And certainly shooting reversal in those days was either ASA 25 or ASA 125. It wasn't much. So bouncing light was one way to create a base light that you basically knew that now you had an exposure. What he used to say, let's excite the bromide, activate the crystals, and now we excite the pixels.
Right.
For the same reason, I did a film with him as kind of B camera, all-purpose assistant, a film about Anne of Green Gables, actually about Lucy Maud Montgomery, if anyone knows who she was. She wrote all the books. And he told me to go to this. This was in the Grange in Toronto when it used to be kind of a town hall. It wasn't very sleek in those days. And work with this lighting crew, CBC lighting crew. I was 23 and I had a Seconic light meter. That was it. And this whole crew was kind of looking at me. They're all smoking and drinking coffee or Coke cans. I found out later in life that those Coke cans were filled with rum, but they were innocently drinking Coke all day. So I said, well, let's get a base light and bounce this off the ceiling, the white ceiling. And the gaffer, he looked at me like, you want me to take this light, some rusted old purple Mole 10K, and bounce it off the ceiling? 1973, that was pretty revolutionary. And I've been reading about Haskell Wexler, all that stuff using space blankets and bouncing lights off umbrellas. And I said, yeah, you can do it. He pulls out his Spectra, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm outclassed by the light meter. But the understanding of flat exposure and then character. My formula that I basically grew up studying New York cameramen, French-Canadian cameramen, Lebrec and Michel Brault, Billy Williams, Ozzie Morris, Owen Reutzmann, and of course, Gordon Willis. That it's all about character. The key fill and backlight is the checkoff list, but you were basically lighting people's faces. And the character is someone face like this, the stand-in stands like this, the actor does the scene like this. You have to be ready for sculpting that light to feed the performance, whether or not it's Oliver Reed in The Brood, getting kind of scary with Samantha Eggar, or Jeff Goldblum covered in rubber in The Fly. You have to compensate for what's there and overexpose it to make it look exposed now. I should say nowadays, work at ASA 800 as a base ISO.
Right.
My joke is that there's more light in the fridge at craft service than there is on the set. And that, in some ways, that's the case. What's your experience been with lighting?
Yeah, well, you had taught me, I think I might have been misheard. You taught me a term called baseline, which kind of refers to creating a mood over the course of a story. And so,
yes.
Yeah, so like the idea of, and it seems when I say it, it's so rudimentary, but it's something I find I have to explain a lot in oftentimes in prep. And you were talking about things being too light and too bright, but the idea of whether it's a comedy or a horror or whatever, you have to establish a baseline look of what is reality in the story for the character, and then that is somewhere kind of in the middle, and then that allows you to go dark and build up contrast, and it allows you to go brighter with the arc of the story rather than starting all bright. You can only go dark.
Right.
you know.
Well, that was part of my philosophy, is certainly as a filmmaker, and that was going to York University and learning how to make films.
Yeah.
Then becoming just a cinematographer, I was still aware of the bigger picture, and working with guys like David Cronenberg, who would write things that would travel into darkness. I would see a lot of films that people like Dean Cundy, people that I'm ASC members with now, we all started doing horror films. And I found that I didn't want to give it away too early. In the first act, my instinct was to show where everything is. And if it's even the living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, the backyard, introduce it. And then when they come back and there's somebody banging on the door, like in Scream, when we introduce everybody and then suddenly Nev Campbell's running up the stairs and closing the door and Dad's coming in, oh my God, that is now darker for a reason. And I want to drag people into darkness. The problem is, if you start with everything dark and moody, you can't scare anybody. You can't turn the lights off. They're already off. So dramatically and cinematographically, we are linked together. And it's kind of my job to serve the story, or any DP's job is to serve the story. What was I going to say? Green Rush. I've only seen bits and pieces. Can I see that on Amazon Prime, or where would I see it?
So it actually just came out this last month on, I believe, Apple, Amazon, and there's a few other services, VOD services I'm not remembering at the moment. Yeah.
Cool. So there is some upside to being locked in our homes, avoiding invisible microbes and
Yes.
things on TV.
Yes.
One thing that a lot of people use that I'm not a big fan of, and let me just see if I can find it, is the standard thing is to have a tripod and an overkeeper, or a slider, it's now called.
Mm-hmm.
They were invented first in Vancouver by guys who did a lot of episodic, and it was all designed for people who couldn't hit their marks. I worked with an Austrian, I think he was Austrian or German assistant in Vancouver, a guy called Theo, who was very German. He would smoke cigarettes like this and was very, very strict. And he trained most of my camera crew in Vancouver. But in terms of focus, he was a focus puller. That was his job. And one shot, the director at the monitor calls cut and says, Theo, is he soft? Meaning, is he out of focus? And Theo walked to the actor and he said, the focus is perfect. And he pushes him on the chest and back 3 inches. The actor was off his mark. So that's our job, to get heads in the box. And that's really what, to me, T-marks don't do. So let me see if I can share something. And that would be this. And these are horseshoe marks. These were on the show in India, this part was shot in Thailand. T-marks to me never work because, hold on, I didn't do this. Can you see it now?
Here we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
So T-marks don't work in the sense that nobody stands like a ballet dancer with their feet like that. So the horseshoe marks allow, I tell them, put your right foot in the right corner and the left foot in the left corner. And your head and your hips and your heels are all in line. And I never use a slider. I got burned on one show where okay, that's enough of that. How do I stop sharing here? Where the slider, the B camera operator on the slider was always trying to maintain the over, and the coverage never stopped moving. So I'd have the loose one, he'd have the tight one, and if there was a slight move of somebody's ear, he would keep the slider traveling, and the background was always shifting. And what's going on? Well, you guys got to keep the over. So it's what I call the tyranny of the over. It's not really what needs to be done. Let me just check one thing here. Do you use the slider a lot?
Less so as an oversave. I mean, in the case of this Green Rush film that I just showed, that was our only dolly, and so I use them more as a movement tool in tight spaces than an oversave, though sometimes you need it.
Yeah.
You know, especially, you know, as an operator on TV comedy and stuff, in the past, we'd have to use them a lot. People aren't, you know, classically trained screen actors necessarily, that were trained to hit an air mark. It just doesn't happen anymore. So sometimes you have to oversave.
Yeah.
But
That's why I like having a dolly grip who is
yeah,
part of the camera,
that's the best for
and he
sure.
just doesn't put it in park and looking at his phone while you're rolling.
Yeah,
And to me, I've had discussions with young actors. Oh, that's for, I stand here. Oh, that's for me. They had no idea, literally no idea. And then I
right.
worked with older actors, someone who was a star in a film called Me, Myself, and Irene. Same thing. Oh, I stand there. We put sandbags down. Just that's, you know, where you toe up and she'd walk forward and stand on top of the sandbag. Like, what is going on here? Anyway, one thing I found as a low budget filmmaker, and I'm going to share the screen for a second, is I would take these ideas to Hollywood, or in this case, first time I did it was in Passenger 57 in Florida, and just simple car rigs. And I found I mentioned this in Florida because they call it the Canadian rig. And it was really, instead of putting pipe, which is the standard way, you'd make a kind of a rail that you could slide the cameras back and forth, mount
Sure.
it to the hood, and then you'd slide the cameras back and forth. Great. Well, I want to move it back. Oh, you want to move it back? Oh, okay. 40 minutes later, they've moved the pipe 3 inches. Well, it's got to move 4 inches. So I said, this is crazy. I hate car rigs. Let's just do something different. Let's take double 1 inch ply. So we have 2 inches of plywood, paint it black, and mount it to the car. That's the Canadian rig. And then as you can see, these these are car plates that Modern makes, but they're inverted ball mounts, so they're extremely low. You can put them anywhere and you can drive away. This was in Toronto. Same kind of thing. So now you can mount the camera and slide it anywhere, forward, back, left, right.
Right. Yeah.
And then climb all over the thing and lock it down. I'm looking for there. So this arm would lock it in place, and you can put a light any lights wherever you want. That's my joke, that this is how cavemen used to make movies. They used to
Right.
make car
Yeah.
rigs like this, and it's important. Side rigs haven't changed at all. Hostess trays. This was a film in Atlanta with same kind of deal. 2 cameras.
Yeah.
So my philosophy all comes from film school in the 70s when we had literally nothing. Had a Super 8 camera, that was it. And everything looked great. Then you get to 16 mil, looks better. You get a reflector, you get some diffusion, then you 35 mil, get HMIs, get anamorphic. Oh my God, it's incredible. If you get rid of all of that and you just have the basics, these are the basics. Let me show you a very expensive car. This isn't it. This is some old caddy. This was in California with Joel Prescott. A lot of my crew in California, I got from Matt. I would ask, you got anybody? And so he would tell me names, and there we were. So this was his take on it, on this big old V8. The hostess trays have never changed. Different people make them. This was on a Jag, and it's the same principle. Just reef it down. These guys would make eye hooks instead of, there's no pipe to speak of, and have never scratched a car, believe it or not. A Jag, and this one's an expensive BMW.
Yeah. I've used this rig a bunch, and it's sure a lot faster than a Norms plate. Much more versatile. You know, I'm just seeing Greg's asking a good question here, because we've gone through a lot of rigs and tech, but you know, how much of the work to you is problem solving like this versus storytelling and art? Is that kind of a nonverbal in your head, or what's the take for
For
you?
me, I have a non-verbal agreement with the director to get him as many shots as possible and as many takes as possible. And the glory hounds are the guys with the, well, I won't get into details, but you can go forever with
Oh,
xenons and smoke and backlight and all that stuff for style. And then the director is watching his shot list dissolve down into a 2-shot. And okay, well, now we'll make it a moving 2-shot. Let's go handheld. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it's salvage work. And I don't think that's fair. Quite often I will hard nose the director and say, we have 8 pages here. And they're all kind of equally written. Where is the substance? How do we want to vary this? Because if every scene is a basket and we put all our eggs in every basket, we're going to run out of baskets. My joke is, I tell directors, the sun is going down while we're eating breakfast. So let's not pretend the time to start hustling is quarter to sunset, and just meet the pace all day. But if you can proportion the day in terms of importance and relevance, quite often, let's do this as a traveling 2 that lands in a single WO reverse, and then we're gone. And this one's, she comes down the staircase, we boom up and into a single. And this one, these 3 pages, let's give this the 2-shot over single, all that sort of thing. Does that answer your question or Greg's question?
yeah, I think so. It's like, has it always been like that, or did you have to find your way into that frame of mind? Like
I think it's always been that way, only because going to film school and learning literally the structure of films, because you were splicing them together with little bits of glue and stuff. It was crazy in the 70s. And so the work that goes into it had to reflect what was coming out of it. And that was important to me to know that the story was, people don't, I have a friend who's a composer, and he jokes that very few people come out of a theater humming the cinematography. They're humming the music, of course. And nobody goes to see the cinematography other than you and I. They're not supposed to notice it. And films that are successful, like The Revenant, or Forrest Gump, that is to me, there's 2 kinds of audiences: the AM and the FM audience. And Star Wars managed to bring in both of those. Pride and Prejudice probably didn't bring in the AM crowd who were going to see Fast and Furious, but finding that blend and making that appeal work, that's part of my job, to keep the light commercial, to open it up to people.
Yeah, that's cool. I was just seeing another question here. One of my key mentors in documentaries was this DP named Ken Sauls, who is only documentaries, and he shoots a lot of action sports, mountaineering kind of stuff. And I spent 3 months in South America with him, and I had shot documentaries before then, but I felt like I really got schooled on that job, and learned a lot from him. And he had this tagline that he'd always use, which was F8 and be there. And and I love that line. And it was both about kind of like a shooting stop, but it was more of an approach, which was, don't get too precious. Tell the story, get the story and get it in focus. And it made sense to, we were in these beautiful places, shoot at a medium to deep stop, show the person in the place. What are your thoughts about a shooting stop, shooting wide open versus not wide open? And is there a place, time and a place, or is there not? What do you think?
Well, lately, I think shooting wide open has become a badge, and the heading that I've used somewhat derisively, but more accurately, is "Look at me" lighting, and
okay,
some eyelashes in focus, and the rest is all out, and the tension built from that dissipates pretty quickly, because an audience looks in and says, "I can't relate to anything." So the story goes away when the focus is gone. And I know it's a current thing. Greg Tolan wasn't afraid of shallow focus, but Citizen Kane was the opposite. Look at everything. And then I feel I have an obligation to an audience to say, here is what's happening, him versus her versus the man with the knife. You decide. I'm not going to put her knuckle in focus with the cell phone calling 911 and all the tension completely out of focus. Then it becomes irrelevant. It's a stylistic choice, and I think you should save things up. It shouldn't be the whole precious look at me thing, because the story falls away from there. So it's interesting. Dean Stinchcomb is just asked me a question about shooting wide open, and that's the truth. Shooting wide open is a necessity at times. Now we've reached a point where we don't need any lights. You can shoot. That's my joke. Shooting on a street at night, you have to send the grips down the street to flag the sign because it's too.
It's more about light management than it is about adding.
Yeah.
At least for night exteriors, especially.
And then the lighting has to follow the story, and as dark and moody as you want to make it. And people ask me, you don't want to do any horror films anymore? You're just doing comedies? Well, I've done everything. Sorry, And night and rain and wet streets and backlight and smoke. Yeah, I don't miss that at all, even though I don't need to light it anymore. Oh, okay. Forgive me. I'm looking at other questions, and this question bar is not scrolling properly. One thing that's interesting that I've learned from older directors, and these guys were guys who started in the in the old studio days, was that they were under an obligation to get the first shot on any production other than an indie or student film. Somebody is wanting the production report has to chronicle everything that's done. And if the call was 7, what time was the first shot? And why did it take till 9:30 to get the first shot? What's going on? The opposite was true when you shot in the studio, and the AD would call upstairs to production to the production manager saying, call time was 7, we got the first shot at 7:05. And everyone else, we got ours at 7:03. So these old timer directors would say, I need a doorknob shot. And I'm thinking, what is a doorknob shot? But it was logical. It was either a phone dial, somebody writing something, a close-up of playing cards, or a doorknob with a hand opening the door. That was all part of the ability to get on the slate. First shot of the day was down Studio 3. And so that momentum feel is, to me, very important. That's how films should start, and not with people showing up late and, what are we going to do now? I'm not sure. How is it working on lower budget films with you? Is the speed there in terms of ambition?
The ambition is definitely there, certainly. I don't know. It really depends. It's a lot of people management, no matter what the budget is. Collaboration and people management and motivating a crew, and that's always a difficult one. I've learned from my crew that I have a terrible poker face. Talking through something, talking through blocking, or talking whatever with actors or a director, and I think all of us have this unspoken task of getting someone else to think what we're thinking in a gentle way.
Yeah.
That's an ever-evolving art form, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's part of that's part of the reason I like to operate a camera, and without deriding anyone who doesn't. I've visited sets in California, and where's Dean? Just follow that cable. He's in the tent, and TP's in the tent, coloring the day's work on the radio, saying, clear the lens, clear the lens. Like that, you can't lead someone. You have to lead from in front. So if you are on the set all the time, and I am on the set all the time, I get to know everyone's strengths and weaknesses, and strengthen the weak ones and refocus the overwhelming ones. But the director, and David Cronenberg said, he uses Peter Shusitsky, and Peter was always a big time Brit DP or DOP and would use an operator. That was a whole different system. And David said, no, 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 no. You operate a camera. That's how it is. And I don't want anyone between us. So that was my instinct from the beginning, that operating and leading the crew is part of it. The reluctance in some directors to come to a decision, that I joke, but it's true. The hardest thing to make on a set is to make a decision. You know, we have literally trucks full of people with power tools and belts and ladders and gear. Where are we going to go? Look this way. Okay, we go. And it's simple, but until that one person who's nominally the leader director says, okay, we'll start with this, and boom, up to there, and she's on the balcony, comes down the stairs, meets him here. Great, okay. We bring in the arm, do the thing, and it's done. So leadership is a rolling ball. I found an interesting question here from my friend Arthur Cooper. If I have a stop that I aim for, and it's hard to tell now that depends on the lenses and the story. If you're anamorphic, I feel you need more depth. To me, I've been a fan of anamorphic for different reasons. With film, it was more essential because you used all four perps, and you ended up bending the light this way and then bending it again on projection.
Yeah, and, all about resolution.
Oh yeah. And when I shot Scream, we shot it with movie cams and airy anamorphics. That was in 90, I forget what year it was, 90 something. And it was, Wes Craven had a tough time with anamorphic, with the soft edges. He couldn't understand. And you know, a 50 mil has the depth of a 50, with the field of view of a 25. And your brain says it should be in focus. What's going on? More than his brain said that, but that was okay. Passenger 57 was all JDC, Joe Dunton, Crystal Moy lenses. That was very interesting. That was the last time I worked with Panavision. I wanted to use JDC lenses. We shot in Orlando. We got the lenses and cameras out of North Carolina. And suddenly Warner Brothers, who produced the film, who no longer owned Panavision, said, it's got to be shot in Panavision. And no, it has to be. Okay, he said, here's the deal. The Pepsi Challenge. Shoot 2 cameras, Panavision and movie cam, different anamorphic lenses. If you can tell me which one looks better, we'll go with that one. And that was what happened. They couldn't tell, and so great, we go with the movie cam. Unfortunately, Panavision got a hold of the footage and took me to Woodland Hills, called me on the carpet to a screening room. Okay, and I thought I was the only guy in this 100-seat screening room. And their lens tech proceeded to scream at me for an hour. And with this little pointer on the screen going crazy. That was the last time I worked with Panavision. Jeez. So the stop in those days to get a good depth to play it tight was 5.6. And at ASA 500, you could do that. I don't aim for a particular stop. I don't like to go past 8 in exteriors just because you're getting more depth than you need, certainly with a CMOS sensor.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I dabbled with the wide open trend, I think, a couple times, and I found that it creates more problems than it's really worth. You know, there's certainly like a time and a place and a moment for thin focus, but for most stuff, it's not really that necessary. So yeah, exactly. 5.6-ish outside, 2.84 inside is kind of like generally what feels right to me, but deviate from there.
Yeah.
This is a worthwhile question. Michael's asking about the relationship between the DP and set design, production design. Practicals, colors, gray walls. It's so important. I think it's a make or break, you know?
Yeah. Now I'm just sharing this with everybody. Can you see this grayscale color chart?
Sure.
This is something that most wardrobe people, designers, set decorators and production designers have never, ever seen. They don't understand white to black. They don't understand 18% gray. And I've literally given them to people and they say, oh, I've never seen this before. Yeah, no kidding. You don't understand reflectance. Don't understand what the simple range of black and white is. So in terms of texture, I did a show in Winnipeg last summer where the choices, let me get rid of this here. In terms of wardrobe, everything was moiré. It was cop uniforms and sports uniforms. And I said, well, you know about moiré, right? Because it was just this rainbow coming out of it. Oh, no, that's fine. Don't worry about that. You do know what it is. Yeah, no, don't worry about it. Now I'm worrying because you don't know what it is. Let's do a test. Everything was moiré. So there is a limit. And I think as things, certainly in Canada, as things are accelerating, people who were buyers 6 months ago are now wardrobe designers. And all they did was go to Harry Rosen and buy suits. They didn't understand that has not only has to fit on the screen, but it has to fit through this kind of tiny tunnel of electronic needs and wants and demands that the film was tolerant of. HD is not at all. So I found that a lot of designers don't understand that and don't want to.
I found it's very difficult to get wardrobe tests organized, at least on smaller stuff, smaller and shorter things. And I think it's really worth fighting for, shooting tests of, paint swatches and fabrics and all that sort of stuff, like every show, definitely.
Yes.
All those colors can make or break what we're shooting, because if it's a white room, you can't really light your way out of a white room, for example. So yeah, I find myself having to really collaborate with the production designer, placing practicals, colors of walls, all that kind of stuff. It's so important. And when you can finally get in sync, it's such a great time at work.
Oh, no kidding.
It's wonderful.
And it's funny because in terms of design, the best design statement I've ever heard was from Richard Silbert, who was he and his twin brother were designers in Hollywood. And he said, a good set is like Swiss cheese. It has holes that lead somewhere. It doesn't matter where, it just isn't a wall. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at you and you have some intriguing windows and depth into the background. And so there's something, the person, and the other things, and you feel absorbed to that. And wild walls are one thing, but ceilings, hard ceilings, I don't mind hard ceilings if there's a reason for them, and lots of up angles. The 3 rules I have, and everyone should remember this, certainly on a budget: no glass fronted pictures, no candelabra threads, which are the little tiny little threads that fit into some look at me desk lamps, because they can only go to 25 watts. So I always tell people, everything's balanced from the lowest light there. How is this possible? If it's 25 watts, then I have to make sure that is the brightest thing. I don't have that much stop. And the third thing is lampshades, believe it or not. A lampshade that is translucent, rather than the hard cardboard ones that are black, that all they do is light up and down. And you can't source a light out of that because it doesn't show that it's a light. Pretty elementary stuff.
Right. It's better to have it translucent and then have the ability to dim it or back it with ND or whatever.
Yeah.
To your heart's content.
I see there's a question for you, Matt. I can't answer it. You have to deal with that one.
Yeah, Zephyr's asking, which filter do you use to get such a perfect beard? Well, it's genetics. It's all your fault, I guess. Let's see. At the risk of stepping into the format debate here, Arthur's asking if film had an inherent softness. Do you find it necessary to degrade a digital image so it isn't too sharp? Specific lenses, filters of choice. I don't know.
What do you think?
to me, I think at this point, film is an aesthetic choice. It's not a technical requirement. We've kind of reached this point where sensors are so good that they're basically an equal playing field. So it's really up to taste. But I certainly find that some digital sensors can be a little too harsh. It also can depend on your cast. If you have a woman of a certain age, for example, or something like that, you have to kind of keep track of. Then definitely, I sometimes favor vintage lenses on like Sony sensors, for example, can feel pretty harsh to me. Arri sensors, not so much. They it's kind of a dealer's choice at that point. But I would rather diffuse with a lens than diffusion most of the time on the lens. I feel like almost every time I've dabbled in diffusion, I've kind of been somewhat disappointed with the result, because it's not only softness, it's halation and other stuff. And I'm always interested to experiment with new filters out there as they come out, but that's me. I don't know.
Well, I got out of the filter bug. I got that out of my system back in the 70s, and the only filters I use are polarizers. And I'm kind of not the Luddite when it comes to lenses. I really like zoom lenses, and my favorite was the 17-102.
Yeah, you still use it.
Yeah, although I've branched into the Canon 17-120.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone can go on and on about the edge. Oh, this, the Anji, oh, the Zeiss, oh, the Summilux. Yeah, okay, great. I went through this whole thing with a post supervisor saying, well, these two lenses don't match. The zoom and this zoom was a 20-120 and a 24-290. And yeah, admittedly, there was a 30-year, heritage between the two. They're both ingenue. And I said, well, let's go into the color suite, press through 2 buttons. Now they match. What is the problem? It used to be with film, getting something that was blue-green to something that was a little cyan, maybe a little warm. And everyone does this, oh, it's got this, what? It's got the finger thing? I don't know what that is. At the end of the day, it's gone through a lot of layers and you really can't tell. I can't tell. And I'm just looking at another question about, what did you see that one about leadership? What have you learned from me? I find that interesting.
I'm trying to quantify it at the moment. It's not something I've actually thought about. You definitely, I noticed growing up, there was never really any, at least that I witnessed, like moments of doubt, if that makes sense. It was like this very confident, decisive, always forward kind of thing. And I've definitely gleaned that a little bit from you. Always have like 2 or 3 solutions in the back of your head. Never come to a director with a problem without a solution, kind of thing. But that and the fact, I think you have a pretty good collection of jokes, probably more jokes than I do, to kind of keep the day going. So it all adds up. It all really helps. But I'm actually curious to that end. I don't know if I've ever asked you this before, but I watched all those confident and decisive and always forward days and months and years. Do you have moments of self-doubt at work or imposter syndrome or any other kind of stuff like that, or have you in the past? And
I'd be wrong to say that I am so blindly confident that I always know what the next step is going to be.
Yeah.
The secret to my success, to quote James Thurber, the secret has been to take the very next film that comes along. That's it. And to go from Vampire in Brooklyn a week later to be shooting Dumb and Dumber. Yeah, okay, great. So the world kind of leads you forward. And for me to say, well, I'm not sure. Let me share something though. I'm just going to share the screen. this was the one time, this was a film called Deck the Halls. And the film itself, very simple, was about Christmas lights. Can you, is that coming up okay?
Yep. Yep.
And so this house, this house, well, here's the same house. The production designer built these houses outside in a little public park with it had a street and everything in it, in White Rock, Vancouver, or outside of Vancouver. And it all took place at night. This is another frame grab, inside or at night.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the summer in Vancouver, it gets dark at about 10:30 and the sun comes up again around 4:45. So we didn't have enough. And I said, well, we're going to have to tent all this. And he literally said, yeah, tents. I don't do tents. Good luck with that. So that was the one time that I was worried. And the solution was to find a tent, which was in Calgary of all places. And these guys saved the day. They built a tent over this exterior, this giant white tent that people, the actors flying into YVR were saying, is that you in that big white tent we saw? They could see it from a plane.
Yeah, that's
But
massive.
that was, I think that was the only time I went, gulp. The mechanics of it, once the tent was up, was great. And instead of duvetine, my key grip, Dan Bennett, had learned on other films we did to black out, renting 20 bys was crazy. He found this fabric that was, I think, 12 feet wide and came in 1,000-foot rolls. And it was designed for filling trenches where they laid pipelines, oil pipelines. So that's what the skin
Oh,
is.
yeah. Okay.
And then when we had actual night, this is how big this whole neighborhood was.
Oof.
And we had to go with different balances to get the lights to read. So we could basically shoot at a 5.6 at ASA 500 and have enough fill so that everyone else wasn't a silhouette. So this was the only time I had my heart in my mouth when all this had to happen on time and on budget.
That's quite a big play for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, with the Technicrane and all kinds of stuff, it was fun.
Yeah.
So I will stop sharing. Do you have another question? My question thing is kind of frozen and shattering here. So.
Zephred's asking about camera movement and making choices motivated or not. It's kind of a big, I guess, kind of a big question. I don't know if he's referring to story-based choices or just day-to-day based choices. But I don't know. I tend to want to, just from a practical sense, I always want to motivate off of movement of the actors or design the start and the end to work off of somebody's movement on the set, unless you're going for a very specific message with moving the camera unmotivated. But I know you're a huge dolly devotee. Dolly's kind of for everything, but you have kind of an interesting methodology with Western dollies.
I'm trying to see if I can find a picture of that. When we shot a film called Youngblood, was a hockey film in Toronto.
Yeah.
And we chewed up the ice so much that we ended up designing a vibration isolation device. And I'll see if I can find it.
I remember, yeah.
Oh yeah, well that was those pictures of you next to the GVRD. I ended up using a lot of it to eliminate, I have too many classics here. I'll see if I can find it somewhere. Younger Matt on set, maybe that's it. I use a Western, well, first of all, the Steadicam didn't come along. This is a skate dolly we made, the GVRD, we call it a Trillium when we made it in Ontario.
Are you sharing your screen?
Oh, not yet, sorry.
Yeah.
I gotta find it, and here it is. So part of what I ended up trying to do was approximate, well, after we did Youngblood, and we did Mighty Ducks 2 as well. I'm still trying to find this rig in a picture. after we did Mighty Ducks 2 as well, we had skate dollies everywhere. And the thought was, wouldn't it be great to just flood the street and freeze it? And then maybe we could use the skate dolly outside. Yeah, it's a great idea. Doesn't always work that way. So I use a Western a lot because the Steadicam financially wasn't there, or literally wasn't there. I first used it in 1979, and it didn't become a sync option for a long time. However, the films that I started watching and kind of learning from back in film school in the 70s were directed by Bernardo Bertolucci and shot by Vittorio Storaro. Number one favorite film for me is The Conformist. And with, I think it was Georges Delerue did the music. A lot of these moves are musical moves. And if you can feel the music, the camera move was a static frame, somebody sitting and thinking, you know, you can come in into their eyes. That's an unmotivated move, but story-wise, it's very strong.
Yeah, that was one of your, it's funny, a lot of my early references were your favorite references, which makes sense because you kind of showed me a lot of that stuff when I was younger, but The Conformist was a big one for me too because of that. Yeah, that and he did another one called, Storaro shot another film a few years after The Conformist called The Fifth Chord. I don't know if you ever saw that. I think it was a low budget kind of giallo Italian noir film, but just fearless shooting. Really interesting static oneers, moving oneers. A lot of scenes played as you know, one strong composition, people in silhouette with you know, reflections against a car roof, against a frosted window, that kind of thing. Really, really cool. I kind of went down a Storaro rabbit hole at the beginning when I decided to do this early Storaro. So that was cool. Thanks for that.
Those are the inspirations, you know, that are invisible. Nobody's saying, okay, write this down, kid, you know, here's how you do it. And a lot of it is going to absorb themselves en route. You know, there's no direct line. So, but I like having all those images in my head and finding something on a set. Oh, hey, that reminds me of, and away you go.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of away you go, Ira's asking a personal question. To the best of my recollection, have you operated in all your films? Yes, I have. I survived 1 week on Passenger 57. I would say, okay, it's a big time Hollywood, Warner Brothers. I'm going to use this operator. And after 3 days, I said, here's the Apple box that I've been sitting on. You sit on that. I can't do this anymore. So quite often, certainly in the Hollywood system, I've used operators who are disabled. And this is being America, they need the hours and the health benefits.
Yeah.
And so I ended up hiring guys who never came to the set. One guy was a paraplegic, and he ended up getting all my hours as an operator as well as the hours. That's how I kind of balance things out. And it's hard. I'm part of a generation. Some unknown guys, Roger Deakins, I think maybe you've heard of him. Yeah, Chivo, a lot of different guys. It's just the reflex. And to say, not only to say, you're not going to operate, but you're going to be in the village with the rest of the village idiots. And I think, I'm not going to be a village idiot. Sorry. The latte bearing, cell phone carrying assistants, opening the tent all hours. It's crazy.
Right. Do you find that you miss some moments, like politic managing moments in being on set that you wish you hadn't? Because I mean, I have, you know, that's why I'm curious. You know, like Video Village discussions that you should be privy to, but aren't because you're at the camera, that kind of thing. Just because of the Video Village culture, what it is now, it's kind of it's become a more of a thing, I think.
A den of iniquity,
I guess.
Well, I mean, it's worth it. To me, I'm the point at the tip of the spear, and whatever happens to the tribe who's going to throw the spear, eventually they have to come to the tip and say, okay, we're going to go. And I don't know, I've threaded my way through the minefield of political ups and downs and intrigue.
Yeah.
Telling stories with pictures. I keep reminding people that that's what we're doing. There's a lot of bravado and ego and not ill intentions as much as just cross purposes. And films are, I accuse people of making simple things complicated. Let's just keep that simple. It is simple.
Hmm.
It isn't simple to have 11 hours and 10 pages, though. You can't fuck around. Working with Wes Craven, he said he would give the shot list to everybody on the set. He'd print them all, Xerox stack of them, the drivers, craft service, everybody have this list, and he would go through it, strike it off. He'd sit in the corner, do the crossword puzzle. Okay, 5A, ready for that? Okay, that was how he saw it. I worked with one crazy English director who had a shot list, and he chain smoked all the time. Every time we got a shot, he'd burn a hole in the number that was. And by the time all these holes were burned, he twisted up, set it on fire, right off to the pub. That was his structure. So in some ways I miss that because it's a little more impulsive and less calculated.
Yeah.
Right now I work with a producer, director, writer who has developed his own editing system, and he cuts the film in the tent next door while he's shooting. So we'll have a fine cut by the time we're even halfway through the scene. He said, I don't need those shots. We're good. Moving on.
That's awesome.
And
Wow.
people say, why do you do that? And he says, why would you not do this? It's the only one in the world. Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great way to figure out what you don't need, which is, I think, harder than figuring out what you do need sometimes, you know?
Simple question here from Michael. I'm impressed with that. What is the biggest difference between how you and I both shoot? Let's you first.
That's a big question. We haven't worked together in quite a while, actually. So I don't know if we've seen each other work. But I think I'd say, just because I'm kind of in this documentary world largely right now, I think that I am maybe more reactive or malleable to a situation, like walk into a place and work with what it gives me, sort of a thing, which is just kind of part of that mindset, shooting films like that. But you're in a different place, so it's a different approach, certainly.
Yeah, but the source, the purity of what the lighting comes from is, source lighting. And if there's a window, and like the Big Rush with a girl on the bed, soft cross key, no fill, no liner. It's just, I call it pure lighting, and it really is. Key fill and backlight is kind of all in your back pocket. It's the tone and the structure of how you want it to track the story. And it's interesting. Arthur's asked me a question about the best image on the set being in Video Village. To me, as a musician, I've been a musician for a long time playing guitar. I realized later in life that all these great recordings were recorded and then remixed and blended and added and sweetened. So the image on set is the beginning. The 3 stages, I call it image acquisition, image manipulation, which is what I do with the frame grabs, to take the whole span of the day's work. And producers say, why do you need all these lights? Well, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. We have to make it all look like it happened within the same 5 minutes of real time.
Yeah.
Then when it's all done, I want to make sure all the frame grabs have the same look of that 5 minutes of actual running screen time. And so to me, the image on set is secondary to what it's going to be in the final print, but the step in between is image manipulation. And if anything comes away from this to anyone who's watching, don't assume that these computers will talk to each other. Make frame grabs, send them to everybody. They'll look at them on their phone, they'll look at them on their laptop.
It's less of a technical thing than it is a political thing in a sense,
It's like when you have a change of equipment or whatever, you need something, put it in an email and copy everybody. And so I needed this crane for this day or this condor for that night. And you got the email. No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. And 25 other people got it too. So this is what this nightclub scene looks like. It's dark and moody with smoke but we have this halo around the girl because she's the love interest. That's the look. Oh yeah, yeah, I love that. I remember seeing that. Look at your email from last October, because now we're in the post suite, and this is
Right.
why this looks this way, dude. Calm down.
Hmm.
But an interesting question here. I'm going to ask you first. What have you taught me, do you think?
I, I don't know. I feel like I've learned everything from you, you know?
Well, let me ask you. Here's a question I know you know the answer to, but I'm going to ask you in front of everybody.
Okay.
The films you've made in film school and high school, indie films. We've lived in the same city for a long time.
Yeah.
How many times did I visit your shooting set and offer you advice?
Never.
That's
And
right.
I,
I never
I
did.
really, really thank you for that. Because no, it's dead on. I think you have to make your own mistakes and learn your own lessons to an extent. And so you gave me a gigantic, well, you and Gary and Jay and all those guys, all those people gave me a huge knowledge base to pull from. But ultimately, you know, I have to go my own way and make my own mistakes and
Yeah.
kind of find it on your own. And so that was great. That was a great gift.
Well, to me, the understanding of teaching someone to shoot, and I tell this to film students, I'm not here to tell you how to shoot something. I'm here to teach you how to see something. And people forget that because they get a lot of interest in the tech aspects of it, what I call smoking backlight. And I want it to look like this music video or that show, and forgetting how to see. That is the source of it all, and that's the origin. So when you were on sets with your mentors, your uncles, and my crew, I could see you watching. I mean, see if I can find these great pictures of you, or maybe you saw them already, of you operating uh, a real live camera later in life. Forgive me for looking away here. Yeah, let me share this for a second. How are we doing on time, by the way?
I think we're close, 5-ish minutes. I don't know. What do you think, Christina? Something like that.
So when your sets ended up looking like this,
10 minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm saying when this is kind of where uh, where I left off and you took over. You know, these are
Right.
Oops, let me keep more pictures of you. This is kind of the understanding of where everything goes, and that's why I feel like in this shot I wasn't there, but you're kind of relaxed and you can deal with it. That someone
Sure.
who's a younger film student is kind of, oh my God, what's going on?
Yeah.
About 9 light. This is a one of your BBLs, NBLs, you know.
That looks like some odd commercial product shoot. I don't know what that was. Long time ago.
Yeah, I'm trying to find yeah, here's the commercial thing. I remember you telling me that, oh yeah, this was a rig. Talk about invention. This is a handheld rig that you and I
Oh
cooked
God,
up.
nuts. This
And
was a weird experiment, chasing a dragon of balanced handheld with a box camera, like a little boxy camera. It hurt about as much as it looks like it hurt.
but
Um,
yeah, you've used all kinds of cameras. And you've lasted longer with Reds than I ever would. But that's a whole other story.
well, they evolved into the DXL, which was a pretty amazing sensor.
Yeah. What was this gig? This is with the Red. You
Uh,
got
that was me as an operator. I think that was a film that my friend John Matashak was shooting, and I was his operator on that film. I don't remember the name of it, to be honest with you.
that's a very Lawrence of Arabia looking thing. And this was you doing your own bike film?
Yes, that was a very un-OSHA approved moment on a motorcycle, shooting a cycling film in LA.
At least you had a helmet on, so
Yeah.
that's Oh, by the way, if you like Matt with a dark beard or no beard or a straight beard, you have a choice now.
Yes, you do. Um,
Yeah. So this was you on the same set in Lebanon, Ohio.
mhm.
You had the 24 to 290. Oh, what was this gig?
Black Jesus.
Oh, wow.
It was a adult swim show. Yeah.
So I'm going to stop the sharing because things are getting down to the wire, I believe. And
So, yeah, so I'm curious here though. What what exactly have I taught you? I to that end to her
well,
question.
as I said, I started off in an analog world, and one
Yeah.
thing I learned in the digital perspective is that I didn't need to light as much as to let the light play. The ambience was always there, and
Mhm.
to sculpt faces, because that's really somebody can be 40 feet tall on a screen and we're looking at their eyes. So part of that was, I really liked some of the work you did on the different films you did in film school. You weren't, I mean, I've never been like afraid, and you haven't been afraid either, I don't think. How about you? Did you ever have uh, ticking, seething doubts on a set, or is it pretty calm?
Oh yeah, quite a bit actually. You know, you draw up a plan that seems a little nuts and just hope it works out. I was, yeah. You mentioned film school. It was kind of funny because I did everything upside down and backwards, inside out and backwards. You know, starting with you on studio features and then learning the basics of lighting with the whole box light system. So by the time I got to film school, I think I was a bit of an alien because I already understood exposure control and all that sort of stuff. And so by that time, I was the one who was given these kind of impossible task films. And I think that's kind of become a lot of my career shooting indies and stuff is
Yeah.
making impossible schedules somehow happen, you know, for better or for worse, setting that precedent. But it was pretty fun.
Well, that's part of the tactics, the push and pull dance we do with directors.
Yeah.
Quite often, an indie film started off as a grand thing that needed an $8 million budget, and now they have 1.0 million, and they still have the same script. So we have
Right.
to somehow fulfill that. But I'm curious. We all live in trying times these days with coronavirus everywhere.
Mhm.
What's your next adventure?
Unknown. Everything I had booked has either been paused or canceled. So time will tell. You know.
I wanted to find out if I can cross the border from this disease-riddled America into British Columbia.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Um, well, it seems that we are close to our end here from the looks of it.
Yeah.
So I guess yeah, next week on this podcast or on this live cast, we've got Serge DeRosier, CSC, and Adriano Goldman. Next Thursday, the 21st at noon. So follow and join the CSC, and yeah, tell what's new with you and anything else you want to share. That's the message.
Well, what I want to share is my friendship with Serge, and he
Yeah.
shot a pilot for a series all about the Crown series.
Yeah.
I believe it was HBO or Netflix, something like that.
Yeah.
He went to the set. Adriano Goldman shoots that, so he did quite
Yeah.
an in-depth look behind the scenes of a really big TV series. So that should be interesting to have them together.
It's a beautiful show. So yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, when you have that kind of money, it's a good thing. So we will struggle through. I don't know how to end this. I guess somebody's going to say, "Okay, you're off the air." But until then, Green Rush is on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Amazon Prime and Apple, I believe. It's another film I shot called Chasing Whiskey, which is a documentary about Jack Daniels, the whiskey brand Jack Daniels. So that was supposed to come out on the 11th, this last week, postponed until I believe August. But
Come out in a theater, you mean?
in the U.S. theatrical, yeah.
Okay.
We'll see what happens with coronavirus and what that does. But that was certainly one of the funnest jobs I've ever had. Traveling the world on Jack Daniels' behalf, telling their stories. That was pretty fun. So that's
Well,
what
you're the
I
only
got.
guy I know who's been to Machu Picchu twice in a lifetime on 2 different films. So you're way ahead of most of us on that.
That's the good thing with docs for sure.
Yeah. And the nice thing is you don't have good and bad, but you don't have an AD saying, okay, back to one, let's go again. If you didn't do it and it doesn't cut together, then you blew it. And it's a lot of pressure to deal with that pressure and then make things go smoothly. Because the subjects you're shooting aren't actors. They react to the vibe from the crew. So you have to basically disguise all that and make it effortless and make it cut together. That was part of my lineage dealing with editors.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
I'm looking at what is the time frame anyway? When does this end? It's 10:48. 10:48. I don't want to keep babbling away. Hold on, I had one more question. Oh yeah, I've asked you that. How many? So I never did visit you ever on one of your sets. I still haven't.
No, I know.
And I always ask you, send pictures, take pictures, send them, and you sometimes do. But that was that. You remember that show in Toronto where you got the guy's AKS case was all screwed up. Do you remember any of that as a perspective?
I was pretty young, briefly. I remember a little bit.
That's cool. Okay, well, and now apparently I'm going to say goodbye to you, and you're going to say goodbye to me.
Cool.
And
all
then
right.
Hope everyone got what they were hoping to get, and contact us through Facebook. We're both on Facebook. I'd love to answer more questions.
Yeah, it's a deal. We're both Instagram, Facebook, Irwin CSC, and you're MWI CSC ASC, right? There it is.
All right.
All right. Well,
good luck, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe out there.
See
Wear
you.
your mask.
Yeah, right.